Imagine all the people living life in peace, no need for greed or hunger. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say, I am a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you will join us and the world will be as one. Goes the lyrics of a popular song by John Lennon. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the participants from different time zones across the globe. St. Joseph's College of Commerce, in association with United Nations Global Compact Network India, UNGC-NI, Masa University Malaysia, the Such Foundation, and Women in Tech Maldives cordially welcome you to the inaugural ceremony of the International Webinar Series on Sustainable Development Goals 2030. On behalf of St. Joseph's College of Commerce, I, Asha Joseph, extend a warm welcome to everyone to the episode 1, Synergizing Sustainable Development Goals, Envisioning the Future We Want. As we begin, let us invoke the blessings of the Almighty. Let us bow our heads and place ourselves in the presence of the Lord. Dear Almighty and ever-loving God, we come into your presence and seek your blessings on everyone present here today. Father, we thank you for keeping us safe and protected during the pandemic. Lord, we specially seek your blessing and divine providence for today's event. We pray that you help us retain the invaluable knowledge and learning experiences we derive from today's event. Lord, we surrender our speakers for the day that they impart their knowledge effectively. Continue to bless them and help them to be at their best throughout the event. Bless the participants as well so that they would be able to glean the vital information from this webinar. We pray that you continue to bless us all. Amen. The organizing committee of the International Webinar Series would like to present a short video about the college.
St. Joseph's College of Commerce is affiliated to Bengaluru Central University and offers postgraduate and undergraduate programs to around 3,000 students. The institution was offered autonomous status in October 2004 and is a well-established research center. The institution was recognized as a college with potential for excellence in February 2010 by UGC. The college is re-accredited with A grade by the National Assessment and Accreditation Council and is awaiting the 4th cycle accreditation result. It has been consistently ranked within the top 100 colleges by National Institutional Ranking Framework. Since its inception, the institution has been a state-of-the-art space for commerce education focusing on multidimensional academic excellence. The college remains responsive to the significant changes and development in the field of higher education as well as in the domain of commerce and business. The institution is governed by the Jesuits, a worldwide Catholic religious order who also run other premier institutions in India and around the globe. The Jesuit mission is based on reconciliation and guided by the universal apostolic preferences of the Society of Jesus. The new UAPs promulgated by the Society are based on 4 vital areas: showing the way to God, walking with the excluded, the poor, the outcast, and socially marginalized, journeying with the youth in the creation of a hope-filled future, and fostering ecological concern and care for the earth, which is a common home for all. This international webinar series on Sustainable Development Goals SDGs 2030, initiated by the institution, takes its inspiration and direction from the universal apostolic preferences of the Society of Jesus.
If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you're a leader. This quote best describes our beloved principal, Reverend Dr. Daniel Fernandez, SJ, who has been the principal of St. Joseph's College of Commerce for 20 years now. The Josephite fraternity is a witness to his excellent leadership of seeking the best for our institution and its stakeholders. Father Daniel is a visionary and a prudent planner. Under his leadership, the institution has been ranked for its excellence by peers and other accrediting institutions. Father persistently works towards raising our standard of education and moving it towards perfection. In spite of the pandemic bringing enormous difficulty, he has envisioned a path to ensure that the functioning of the college excels through all the challenges. It is my absolute pleasure to call upon our dear principal, Reverend Dr. Daniel Fernandez, SJ, to deliver the welcome address.
This webinar series was conceptualized in early 2019 with a sense of urgency, understanding that we have just a decade to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals 2030, inspired by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, guided by Pope Francis's encyclical on human ecology, Laudato Si, and enthused by the universal apostolic preferences promulgated by the Society of Jesus. St. Joseph's College of Commerce initiated this series. Pope Francis's Laudato Si and the universal apostolic preferences of the Jesuits have brought in a language of faith into the environmental dialogue. It increasingly calls for nothing less than a revolution of our hearts and minds, for a transformation of our societies and individual lifestyles to live in harmony with God's creation. It is in this backdrop that this international webinar series on Sustainable Developmental Goals 2030 is presented to you. And it is my pleasure to welcome each one of you to this meaningful webinar series. The keynote speaker of today, Dr. Arun Jacob, economist and development coordination officer, United Nations, Egypt. The moderator of the panel discussion, C.S. Sandhya, the panelists, Dr. Abhijit Sharma, Mr. Abhimanyu Manimaran, and Mr. Sankalp Mohan Sharma. Thank you for joining us from across the globe, and a very special welcome to each one of you. Here at St. Joseph's, we believe in creating dialogues with the industry, with professional bodies, with environmentalists, and with social justice advocates. We have often created forums and portals for effective exchange of ideas. Today's webinar derives greater prominence from the right collaboration that we have established. A warm welcome to our representatives, collaborators from United Nations Global Compact Network India, Mahasa University Malaysia, Sacha Foundation, and Women in Tech Maldives. Thank you for your continued support. This webinar has truly transcended geographical boundaries with the overwhelming registration received from all over the world. It is my pleasure welcoming all of you, dear participants. At this juncture, I wish to acknowledge the dedication of the convener, Dr. Purnima, and the entire team towards the webinar. True to the motto of the institution, faith and toil, the team led by the convener has labored for numerous hours. With their untiring efforts, communicable energy, and infectious enthusiasm, they have made this happen. My gratitude and congratulations to the team. COVID-19 has thrown several questions at us. Has COVID-19 created setbacks in our progress towards sustainable developmental goals, or has it created positive impact on planet-related sustainable development goals? Will setbacks have a permanent effect, or can this crisis be converted into an opportunity to bounce back even stronger? To understand all this in a more profound way, keep watching this space for the future episodes to unfold. Ladies and gentlemen, as I extend a warm and cordial virtual welcome to each one of you, if you happen to be in Bangalore sometime, do drop in to St. Joseph's College of Commerce and give us the pleasure of welcoming you in person. Thank you, and God bless all of us.
Thank you for your encouraging and inspirational words, Father. I now take this opportunity to introduce the webinar convener, Dr. Purnima Vijaykumar. Dr. Purnima is an alumnus of St. Joseph's College of Commerce and is a dynamic and committed faculty member with a great sense of commitment and passion for teaching. She has a PhD from Bharatiya University, Coimbatore. She has participated and presented in several national and international seminars, conferences, workshops, and training programs. She has to her credit several research papers published in reputed journals. She has also delivered many guest lectures for other colleges and universities in her capacity as a resource person. Dr. Purnima was awarded the Adarsh Vidya Saraswati Rashtriya Puraskar, National Award of Excellence 2018 by the Global Management Council, Ahmedabad, and also has a distinction of being one of the best teachers in the country for a distinguished work in the interest of the students and education field. I now invite Dr. Purnima to deliver the concept note of the webinar.
A warm greetings. It is indeed my honor and privilege to deliver the concept note of the webinar today. Human craving for fast-paced development has given rise to unsustainable practices, which in turn resulted in unequal distribution of all forms of resources. This man-made inequality, a residue of capitalist human enterprises, has made harmonious social coexistence a dream deferred. Envisioning a change in this realm needs to begin by creating and spreading awareness about the severity of the predicament among various stakeholders of the global economy who knowingly or unknowingly participate in the process of disrupting the natural world order. Bearing in mind the need to revise individual and collective approaches towards the complications, the United Nations has designed 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable Development Goals, adopted by the UN member states in 2015, was a universal call to strategize ways for eradicating poverty, augmenting social inclusion, stimulating environmental sustainability, and promoting world peace. These goals invite immediate attention of global communities towards the acute requirement to reorganize human priorities in the field of production and consumption. The envisioned future can be realized only through encouraging and embracing an interdisciplinary approach involving all stakeholders, thus ensuring sustainable development in all arenas of human life. Under these circumstances, the international webinar with its first episode, Synergizing Sustainable Development Goals, Envisioning the Future We Want, would emphasize on the indispensability of proactive deliberations in the suggested spheres. Through this initiative, St. Joseph's College of Commerce joins hands with the United Nations in enlightening and shaping socially responsible citizens who are sensitive to the needs of others. Keeping in line with the universal apostolic preferences, the webinar would focus on the scope and limitations of implementing sustainable development strategies in areas pertaining to environment, human rights, labor, economic growth, and anti-corruption. The webinar series also attempts to critically inquire the modalities of the SDGs and the best practices adopted by the developing nations in accomplishing the practical dimensions of the Sustainable Development Goals proposed by the United Nations. The institution envisages this endeavor to be a space for effective dialogue and research on sustainable development by bringing together representatives from diverse disciplines of the global academia, corporate world, NGOs, and the international community at large. Initiatives of this character hold more significance in the present scenario as they synergize the scattered efforts towards making the sustainable future a reality. Wishing each one of you a very fruitful and an enriching session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Purnima, for the informative knowledge shared on the concept of the webinar. I now take this opportunity to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Arun Jacob. Dr. Arun Jacob is an economist and development coordination officer at the UN office in Egypt, contributing to the coordination of UN activities, providing policy advice, and leading SDG knowledge generation. Prior to this, he worked at the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific in Bangkok within the team that coordinated the UN support for SDG implementation in the Asia-Pacific region. Dr. Arun was one of the key organizers of the annual Asia-Pacific Forums on Sustainable Development and supported several countries in the region with SDG implementation, including developing of voluntary national reviews. He also worked at the global level within the UN Conference on Trade and Development in Geneva on harnessing technology and innovation for sustainable development. Prior to joining the UN, he has worked as an economist within the President's Office of Tanzania, where he was selected to the core team that developed the 5-year and the 15-year national development plans. He is the lead author of several UN flagship publications and is published in peer-reviewed journals in economics. Dr. Arun holds a PhD in development economics from the Graduate Institute in Geneva, MPhil in economics from the University of Cambridge as a Gates Scholar, and BA in economics from St. Stephen's College, Delhi. I now invite Dr. Arun Jacob to deliver the keynote address.
Hello, good afternoon. Can someone please confirm you can hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Respected Reverend Dr. Daniel Fernandez, the Principal of College, distinguished panelists today who are participating in this webinar, moderator, Ms. Sandhya, and a very energetic team of organizers led by Dr. Purnima, Ms. Asha, Ms. Sanjana, Mr. Giridhar, Mr. Vinay, Mr. Thomas, and thanks a lot for the excellent coordination and the meticulous planning so far. It is a great pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thanks a lot for St. Joseph's College of Commerce and the UN Global Compact Network and the various other partners involved in this webinar. I just want to confirm you can also see the screen and the slides which I'm sharing now. Good. Yes, great. Thank you. So today, being the first episode of the webinar, I've been given the task of two things. One is to introduce the Sustainable Development Goals and give a kind of a lay of the land in terms of how the implementation of SDGs are going. But given the eclectic mix of audience we have today before us, which as the moderator mentioned, from private sector to CSOs and others, it is important to just start with the basics. So I'm going to do that. But please bear with me if it's too basic for you. Maybe these are things which you're already aware of, but I hope during the course of presentation, we do touch upon some aspects, at least some of it is new for you. So allow me to just start my presentation today. So you have on screen the growth in income per capita over the last 2000 years globally, wherever we can find comparable data adjusted for inflation. So this is the average income per individual in the world. What you can notice is that across the countries, one message is very clear. This point in time is the richest in human history in the last 2000 years. At the same time, we are all well familiar with the fact that this wealth and this richness is not uniformly distributed across the individuals. The world's 2,000 odd billionaires have more wealth than 4.6 billion people, who make up 60% of the planet's population. And in the case of India, the richest 1% hold more than 4 times the wealth held by 953 million people, or the 70% of India's population, according to the Oxfam's Time to Care report. And this stark inequality also pervades to factors beyond income and wealth, to life opportunities. For example, let's take the case of children born in year 2000. If the children born in year 2000, they happen to be born in a low human development country, there is a 17% probability that they didn't survive up until 2020 due to many reasons. And also, only 3% of those children born in low human development country happen to be enrolled in colleges now. On the other hand, in high human development country, 1% do not survive, and at least 50% are guaranteed to be enrolled in colleges. So these kind of stark inequalities in opportunities and access to healthcare and access to education are continuing to entrench the inequality that we confront in daily life across the world, both within and between countries. Moving on, millions of people are facing the devastating impact of climate change, and 2010 to 2019 happened to be the hottest decade ever experienced globally, as far as records go, according to the UN World Meteorological Organization. And the climate anomalies in 2019, you have it on the screen now, and these are no longer becoming anomalies, these are becoming the norms of our daily life. So I think we all agree to the fact that we are confronting a complex mix of development challenges which require a bold, ambitious, and collective response from us. And as Father Principal rightly said, we need a revolution in heart and mind to address some of these development challenges. So that's where the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, come into being. And many of you know that sustainable development is not a new concept. And Father Principal in his introductory remarks did touch upon some of the history of the sustainable development as a concept, on how it is ingrained in many of our religious thoughts and beliefs as well. But one of the most cited definitions of sustainable development is from the Brundtland Commission report titled Our Common Future, which says that development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. This definition has 2 particular elements in it. One is the reference to the needs of our current generation, that it is important to recognize the needs of the people. At the same time, it also refers to, it alludes to indirectly, a certain limitations which are posed by the environmental systems, the techno systems, and the social systems around us. So we need to be mindful of that limitations, and we need a development paradigm which is sustainable development, which respects that limitations. And these SDGs, just to quickly remind ourselves on the different processes which led to the SDGs. I'm not tracing way back in history, I'm just starting in 1987 with the Brundtland Commission report, and then the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio, which actually led to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and several other initiatives. And the 1990s was actually a decade of a lot of major UN conferences, including the Conference on Women, Conference on Education, and several other conferences, where the world leaders and other stakeholders came together and decided that we need to act together to confront the rising challenges of the development challenges, which I mentioned at the end of the introduction. And these decades of major conferences led in 2000 to the Millennium Declaration, which actually gave rise to the Millennium Development Goals in 2000. As we all know, 2000 to 2015 was the MDGs era. And in 2012, when it was 20 years past the initial Rio Earth Summit, the UN organized another Sustainable Development Summit, which actually catalyzed more discussions around the post-2015 agenda. And in 2015, we had the UN Sustainable Development Summit, where the Sustainable Development Goals were adopted. So that's the brief history of different processes converging to the SDGs. So before going into SDGs, just a minute on the whole Millennium Development Goals experience, which all of you must be fairly familiar with. As you know, MDGs had about 8 goals and 21 targets. And there were significant achievements with Millennium Development Goals. For example, more than 1 billion people were lifted out of poverty during the MDGs period, and the number of out-of-school children in primary school worldwide fallen almost by half, and several other examples in different fields. Of course, what I personally consider as the biggest contribution of MDGs to the whole development landscape is the traction it received. It actually became the yardstick on which countries and the stakeholders and different partners began to judge the progress, the development, or that became the yardstick that we all refer to. So it is because of this kind of success, this enormous traction it received globally, that despite the fact that many of the targets were not attained in the MDGs era, when it came to 2015, nobody asked the question whether we need a new set of development goals, because it was understood we needed it because of the success of the MDGs. We just went ahead and creating a new set of goals, which are the SDGs. So as you know, there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals touching on different aspects from poverty to hunger to health to water sanitation to partnership, peace and justice. We don't have time to go through each and every goals, but just to clarify for those who haven't seen the full document of SDGs in detail. So each of these broader goals, for example, like the goal 1 on no poverty, which targets ending poverty in all its forms everywhere, it has corresponding targets attached to it. So one of the targets is target 1.1, where we say by 2030, we hope to eradicate extreme poverty for all people everywhere, currently measured in terms of the $1.25 metrics. And each of these targets are then measured using specific indicators. So that's how the whole Sustainable Development Goals are structured. So we have 17 goals, 169 targets and 231 indicators that the world leaders and all of us agreed upon, committed upon in 2015. So the initial moderator did allude to the fact that I did work in Geneva with the UN Conference on Trade and Development, where I did work on the technology and development issues, where I had the fortune to work very closely with member states on negotiating on a lot of UN resolutions related to technology and development interactions. And I remember even negotiating a one-page text took ages. And in this current context of where the multilateralism is taking a backseat and there is very little trust between countries, the fact that we managed to negotiate and agree on 17 goals, ambitious goals, 169 targets and 231 indicators, it is definitely a triumph of multilateralism. And it is multilateralism at its best, and we need to recognize that. And going ahead into some of the fundamentals on SDGs. Again, this is a universal agenda. This is not just for the developing countries. It is an agenda for all of us, for the rich countries and poor countries alike. And the goals are integrated, indivisible, and it balances 3 dimensions of sustainable development. As you must have noticed, there are goals on economy, society, the social issues, and the environmental issues, and these are interlinked and intertwined in many of the indicators. And it kind of enshrines 2 core principles. One is that of leave no one behind, and pretty much in terms of the reference which Father Principal mentioned in the introduction on working with the excluded in terms of the international apostolic preferences, and the concept of human rights, protecting human rights. And it also, these goals just doesn't say that, okay, these are the goals and try to achieve it. It doesn't say that. It actually goes on to elaborate what means of implementation, including financing mechanism, technology, trade, partnerships, and the data are needed to attain these goals. It specifies it sets targets on these means of implementations as well. And there is a strong emphasis on follow-up and review mechanism, and it calls for a whole of society approach. That's why we are here. These are not goals of the UN. These are not the goals of just the governments. These are the goals for each and every one of us. And we need a whole of society approach to realize the SDGs. So what has happened since 2015? It was, as I said, it was a very difficult process to negotiate these goals. So what did we do since then? So this was the time around which I moved from Geneva to the Regional Economic Commission in Bangkok, where we serviced about 53 member states across Asia and the Pacific. So I was closely involved with many of these initial processes. So unlike MDGs, which took about, I would say, 5 to 6 years for countries to set up processes to follow up to start implementing MDGs, when the SDGs were adopted right after that, countries, the government leaders took decisive measures to make progress towards SDGs. We could see integration of SDGs into national development plans and policy processes. For example, if you take the latest development plans from Korea to Malaysia to Bhutan to Nepal, you all see their 5-year plans now integrating SDGs as a core. And new multi-stakeholder platforms are established across many of these countries. And you can see a central government entity being appointed many often as a coordination entity of SDGs implementation. The example in India is the institution of Niti Aayog. And many countries have voluntarily presented at the high-level political forum in New York every year, their voluntary national reviews already on how well they are doing in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, what progress have been achieved, and what challenges remain. And India has, interestingly, already presented twice the VNRs, and I highly encourage all of you, if you haven't seen it, to actually go to Niti Aayog's website and read those voluntary national review documents. And there have been quite a lot of efforts to localize SDGs, and India's Sustainable Development Goals Index is an example of that. And it is one of the first and foremost of subnational SDG measurement mechanism, which is an excellent way to localize SDGs. And in Japan, we can see examples of voluntary local reviews where cities and smaller provinces are actually are evaluating and reviewing for themselves how well they're doing in terms of SDGs. And it's not just the governments who have made efforts. We can see associations of private sector. I'm glad to note the participation of Global Compact India today, and academia, the NGOs and the civil societies are rallying behind the SDGs, and we can see several efforts in this direction. So all these efforts have been made. So how are we doing in terms of SDGs? So one of the tasks at the Regional Economic Commissions is to measure the progress of how well we are doing, develop some kind of a school report card of sort that we get in our schools on how well the region is doing, on average a country is doing in terms of SDGs. So you have it on the screen now, the progress report, the latest progress report on the 17 SDGs before you. So as you can see, if the blue progress line touches the 2019 vertical line, that means that we are well on course to achieve that SDG. So some quick glance at this chart shows us some results. One is that we are failing short in almost all the goals. That's the unfortunate news. But in some goals like quality of education, affordable and clean energy, we are closer to the 2019 target where we should have been if we were to achieve the 2030 agenda by 2030. But there are goals like climate action, or responsible consumption and production, where we are not only making progress, we are actually moving in the opposite direction. where situation is worsening in many countries. Of course, a caveat has to be said that it all depends on the indicators that we use to measure. So we are using the official set of SDG indicators, and the kind of the mobile signal you have on the right shows the strength of evidence we have to support these claims. Though those are weak in terms of environmental goals, but still we are seeing alarming trends in terms of reversal of progress in many of these regards. So that is the situation. So the UN Secretary General called for a group of 15 eminent scientists to look at sustainable development goals, the progress so far, and try to see what can we do to accelerate the achievement of SDGs going forward. So the group of 15 scientists wrote the Global Sustainable Development Report last year, submitted it to New York to the UNSG, and they highlighted that we cannot attain sustainable development goals with business as usual. We need transformations in our socio-economic environmental system. So they highlighted if we can attain 6 transformations, you have it on the screen, these 6 transformations ranging from strengthening human well-being and capabilities, shifting towards sustainable and just economies, building sustainable food systems, healthy nutrition patterns, achieving energy decarbonization, universal access to energy, promoting sustainable urban and peri-urban development, and securing the global environment commons. If these 6 transformations can be achieved, and they try to list out several actions and entry points to attain these transformations, we will be able to make good progress towards SDGs. So from the 17, we have now come to these 6 transformation lens. So one of the reports for which I was the lead author for, which got released early this year at the Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, what we did is we looked at these 6 entry points of transformations and tried to see, okay, if it's not just the SDGs, let's look at these 6 transformative areas and try to see how well the region is doing, how well on average the countries are doing in this, so that we can learn from each other in terms of countries who are making good progress, and we can understand which are the countries who are lagging behind. So I recommend you to read also to that report, because I cannot go into great length into details of this report, but you have it available in just Google, you'll get it. So quickly, in terms of progress across these 6 transformation, the message is pretty much the same as the 17 SDGs. The transformations are slow on average, while we're making good transformations, good progress in terms of the area of energy access, decarbonization and universal access to energy, and strengthening human well-being and capabilities, we are failing short of progress in the other 4 areas of transformation quite a lot. So we developed a methodology, tried to see for countries to help to see each other where they are in terms of progress in these areas. And we try to classify countries into 4 kind of quadrants. One are, and I'm not going to the details again of the methodology, but it's about understanding countries who are actually making good progress in terms of the speed of progress, and also in terms of covering good ground in terms of level of achievement. So those countries who make excellent progress both in terms of speed and the level of achievement are called the sprinters of the region. And the countries who only make good progress in the speed of progress, but still they have a long way to go, those are the countries on the top left quadrant are called the fast risers. And the countries who have made good progress in the past, but now they are kind of slowing down their progress, those countries are called the last milers, which are the bottom right quadrant. And in the bottom left quadrant are the countries which are called aspirants, because they're making slow progress in terms of the speed, and also they have a long way to go in terms of the levels of achievement. So let's try to look at where India is placed, considering the majority of the participants today are from India. Let's try to see where India is placed in terms of these transformations. So in the area of strengthening human well-being and capabilities, for example, in terms of the education, in terms of health access and areas like that which are linked to the human well-being and capabilities, India can be claimed as a fast riser because India is making very fast progress, but it still has a long way to go in terms of reaching the kind of level of achievement required by the SDGs and the 2030 agenda. At the same time, in the case of sustainable, shifting towards sustainable and just economies, India is actually a sprinter. It has actually made very good progress. It's continuing to make fast progress. At the same time, it has it has actually covered quite a lot of ground, and it is making fast progress. So it is one of the sprinters in the region. But despite this good performance in these two transformative areas, the progress in terms of energy decarbonization and universal access to energy, as well as in the case of securing global environmental commons, India is still an aspirant who is located in that bottom left quadrant. It needs to pick up pace. It needs to, attain more, make more levels of progress as well. So that is in a nutshell some of the conclusions in terms of the positioning of India vis-a-vis other countries. But what were some of the insights from this work? So what we notice are few. One is the fact that income is not a silver bullet. We find even very high income countries sometimes not covering, they are not the ones who are always located in that sweet sprinters quadrant. They are sometimes in the fast racers. Sometimes they are also found as an aspirant in certain dimensions of transformation. And countries with special needs, like small island developing countries, countries which are landlocked countries, they are overcoming some of these structural barriers, and they are also emerging as sprinters in some of the transformative areas, which is very good to see, to see that it is possible to overcome some of these structural barriers which countries confront. And we notice in line with the title of this webinar, we observe strong synergies in performance across these entry points. There are very good core movements in terms of performances in these different 6 transformative areas, while the trade-offs between entry points do not seem to be very statistically significant across the region. That it shows that even though there are trade-offs, countries are possibly managing those trade-offs some or the other. One important conclusion from this work is that even advanced countries are grappling with the problem of last mile challenge, the case of ensuring that development reaches the most vulnerable, the last 1% or so of the population, or reaching the most rural parts of the country. That challenge remains. So I'm very much excited to look forward to the presentation by Dr. Abhijit Sharma today, who's going to touch up on how the localization of SDGs are relevant in the case of the northeast of India, which is considered one of the backward regions in India, and definitely posing a last mile challenge in many aspects to India. So moving on, what were some of the lessons? Because this webinar series is all about learning the lessons from the SDGs experiences so far. So 4 key lessons came about from our experience after analyzing the experiences of SDGs implementation in several countries, especially these countries who can be classified as sprinters or fast risers. So 4 key messages came about. One is, it is of utmost importance for setting the direction and creating a mission orientation on where you want to go in each of these 6 areas, and to mobilize stakeholders and partnerships around that common vision. And in that vision setting and setting the direction, what we found is the power of bold legislations and the power of no is very significant. When I say no, I am referring to initiatives like no single-use plastics, or no more coal power plants investment in our country. So those power of no can actually set a direction and also create a lot of efforts and initiatives in the right direction. That was one important insight from after analyzing these country experiences in these transformative area. And secondly, we need policy making that allows for managing complexity. As you know, SDGs are cross-cutting, interlinked, and we need a systems approach to actually solve many of the SDG issues. So for that, a siloed approach towards policy making is not going to help. You need to have that policy making, that bandwidth within the policy making that allows for managing complexity. It refers to, for example, aspects like we need policy experimentation, because very often you need to instill a kind of instill a policy, then try to evaluate that policy and change and fine tune that policy if required in a very short amount of time to actually get all the elements right in terms of the SDGs, and to ensure you're able to measure both the direct and indirect impacts of the policy, so that managing the complexity becomes an important part of the solution. And that's where the whole academic audience today we have before us in this webinar, you play a critical role here to teach the new generation of policymakers, the new generation of students, the art of managing complexity, the art of systems thinking, systems analysis in any discipline, even if it is commerce, how it is linked with, for example, the environmental outcomes in your country, how it is related to the commercial a contract going to impact the inequality in your country. If our students are informed about a systems analysis and taught to do that systems analysis from early on, when they become policymakers, they are better equipped to manage this complexity. And thirdly, it's important to realign the systems and institutions. There is no way out, because those age-old systems need to be changed, whether it is gender norms which we confront, or for example, the centralized energy systems that we have in many of the countries. Maybe that is not suited to meet the needs of the last mile, to ensure that clean energy reaches the last, the people who are left out of the grid normally. We need to perhaps realign the system. So those realignments and systems and institutions are critical, and those need to be underway as soon as possible. And finally, it is about readying people and institutions to sustain change. Here the word sustain change is important, because it's easy to trigger a change, because maybe with the legislation you can trigger a change, but to sustain it you need the ownership of these changes from the people involved, from all stakeholders involved, and we need to institutionalize those changes. That's where the success factor is in terms of SDGs. And that's where these transformations, that's how the transformations can be assured in many contexts. So as many speakers before me alluded to the COVID-19 impact, of course, this has far-reaching impact on SDGs. The UN has developed a framework for socioeconomic response to COVID-19, and we in different country teams are trying to roll out these response, working with different stakeholder groups to ensure that we are able to limit the impact of COVID-19 on SDGs, and that SDGs don't lead to lost decades of development. And we are emphasizing on the fact of building back better, building back greener in all the contexts as much as possible, so that we actually can use the COVID-19 pause to the business as usual system, which we experience now, into a transformative experience, and we are working towards it. And finally, we have 10 years left, as the moderator and Father Principal said. What do we need to do with the next 10 years? We need to mobilize everyone everywhere, and so we are entering the decade of action. And in mobilizing everyone and everywhere, webinars like this play a great role in creating that awareness, bringing together those different stakeholders, and having this very inclusive discussion platforms as we go forward. And also we need to demand urgency and ambitions from policymakers, from our institutions, our organizations we are associated with. We need to be part of this decade of action. So it is time for us as owners and custodians of these sustainable development goals to demand urgency and ambition from whichever setting we are in, whether it's private sectors, CSOs, academia, or anywhere. And finally, we need to design new innovative solutions to accelerate progress towards SDGs. For that, I am looking at all the students before me today of St. Joseph's College and others, because you, as the new startup creators, the new entrepreneurs of tomorrow, when you enter that job arena, please keep in mind that whichever initiatives and innovations you are creating has a good very high sustainable development impact. And it is through those new innovative solutions that we will be able to collectively achieve the 2030 agenda. I stop here. I hope I'm within my time limit. Thank you once again for this excellent opportunity, and I look forward to hearing from all our eminent panelists and hearing your responses as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arun, for broadening our outlook on sustainable development goals with your informative address. Next on the agenda is a panel discussion led by CA Sandhya P. Nagar. Ms. Sandhya, a successful chartered accountant and an entrepreneur, is a person with high aspirations. Her achievements stand as a testimony to her professional commitment and mastery. Jagrati, Shaping the True You, an organization which is working efficiently in the field of education, is her brainchild. Her holistic educational approach, which encourages the choice of careers among the youth, is an idea she always emphasizes and truly believes in. Also, as a practicing chartered accountant, she efficiently manages an audit firm, Nagar and Nevada. Besides being a neuro-linguistic practitioner and a well-versed Sanskrit orator, she has also won a lot of accolades as a debater in various prestigious platforms. I now invite Ms. Sandhya to lead the panel discussion.
Gro Harlem has once said, sustainable development is the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. UN Secretary has rightly said there is no plan B because we do not have a planet B. We have to work and galvanize our actions. As we ride together the wave of pandemic in 2020, there is no better time to strategize our thoughts and actions than today in the now, the present. I, CA Sandhya P. Nagar, am the moderator for the panel discussion of the first episode of the international webinar. And ladies and gentlemen, once again, I welcome you all. A good discussion increases the dimensions of everyone who takes part. With this note, let's begin the panel discussion, which promises to enrich our understanding and varying viewpoints on SDGs. We have with us today a diverse yet distinguished group of panelists, post which we shall proceed to the Q&A. It gives me immense pleasure in introducing our panelists. Dr. Abhijit Sharma. He is presently engaged as Director at Indian Institute of Entrepreneurship under the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. He represented the Northeast region as the member of the working group set up by Planning Commission on National Rural Livelihood Mission. He was a renowned mentor for the upcoming entrepreneurs under the Bharat Yuva Shakti Trust program in Assam. He is the name for the consultancy on microfinance and livelihood in the Northeast India. The title of Dr. Abhijit Sharma's paper is Fostering Entrepreneurship for Localization of SDGs in the Context of a Backward Region like Northeast India. Hence, his discussion today would broadly cover the areas of role of entrepreneurship, challenges of entrepreneurship in NER, and the way forward. I heartily welcome you, sir. We are all yours. Over to you.
Thank you, Sandhya. I would like to. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
So, respected, I would like to also share my PowerPoint. Respected Principal of St. Joseph College of Commerce, Dr. Purnima, staff of St. Joseph College of Commerce, other sponsors of this webinar, participants both from the academia and from the student community. I would like to thank you for inviting me to be part of this international webinar series upon an important topic. Dr. Arun Jacob very beautifully and eloquently spoke about it, which is very, very critical if we need human progress to go beyond 2030. I would today talk about fostering entrepreneurship in order to achieve localization of SDGs, and I'm taking the context of Northeast region for people who are outside India. Northeast region is one of the backward regions in the country, and this is an area which the entire country is focused upon, and it's expected that they will be the driver of growth in the coming decade. So I'm focusing on this topic today. I begin with the first element of entrepreneurship as impacting in SDG was spoken sometime in 2015 in the UN General Assembly, where they talked about entrepreneurship as an arena of creating jobs, driving economic growth and innovation, bringing about equitable and balanced economic regional growth, improving socio-economic conditions, enabling youth, which is now supposedly in India the demographic dividend, and to turn their ideas and energy into commercially viable projects. The economic survey, which was done in 2019-20, our Subramanian report, focused immensely on this entrepreneurship, where how do we achieve or ensure that entrepreneurship grows in the area and drives the economy. In terms of the SDG goals, it directly impacts 6 SDGs. The first is in terms of poverty, which is quite obvious. Entrepreneurship drives economic growth and hence, of course, takes people out of poverty. It focuses on empowering women. There is a whole lot of area that India has been doing very, very well in terms of women empowerment through the self-help groups, movement, etc. So creating not just economic growth, but also bringing about dignity, creating empowerment among women, and reducing the gender imbalance or inequality. The third is obviously in terms of business creation, creating what we call as decent work and focusing on economic growth. Entrepreneurship focuses on another important element, which now today the government of India is focusing very strongly, the area of startups, innovation, stand-up, etc., where it is expected that innovation and technology will drive growth. The other element, and this is very clearly, very strongly focused on marginal areas across the country, that entrepreneurship can also reduce what we call as inequalities, both regional and also across social groups. And lastly, entrepreneurship can also bring about environmentally, and that is the area of social entrepreneurship, where they can bring about products and services which enhances the entire quality of life, not just economic growth. So entrepreneurship touches upon the whole vast spectrum of what I would call 6 immediate impactants SDGs. In terms of another area that I would say entrepreneurship as a vehicle would impact 4 areas. One is the green entrepreneurship. A whole lot of activities is very clear there on the slide, which is related to green entrepreneurship. The next is the youth and women entrepreneurship, and the activities are shown on the top, which is focusing on the different SDGs. And then you have the social entrepreneurship. Dr. Arun Jacobs talked about education, talked about health, etc. So that is another area where entrepreneurship can really push, and there have been a lot of cases in India, across the world on this. And so entrepreneurship can be a vehicle which can really impact all of these activities. So I would like to focus on these 4 as vehicles for pushing what I would call as growth in the Northeast region, and not just growth, but also reducing inequity as we go forward. In India, as we know, that despite growth, poor has persisted. In the Northeast region, this is more so. And despite the growth, we also see that we are seeing more of a jobless growth. And if this needs to transform or has to change, you need to have entrepreneurship, or entrepreneurship is the only way forward. We would actually bring not just growth, but also drive or bring about what we call as jobs, creator of jobs as we go forward. The entrepreneurship ecosystem actually touches upon 6 elements which we need to look at if we need to push entrepreneurship to go forward. One is, of course, the policies. The second one is the finance, the full spectrum of services that will be available. The third is culture, whether the society promotes or fosters entrepreneurship growth. And the fourth is the support, like the government, NGOs, infrastructure, etc., or technical services which are available. Markets, what is the networks that is available, what are the type of customers that are there, and lastly, which is very critical, and I will touch upon that as we go forward, is the human capital, which actually drive entrepreneurship. Let us now look at Northeast region as a context. Now, if you look at Northeast region, it is a resource region. You have a lot of primary products. You have also mineral resources, a lot of non-farm based activities, which has potential. We have again a lot of potential on tourism. And the second important element, which is that it has a very strong base of social capital. This is very critical because that is something that we will talk about a little later in the way forward. But the region has not been able to go forward primarily because of some challenges. One is that the volumes are low, the production is disaggregated, the infrastructure being poor, it is really a logistic nightmare, and financial access or availability of finance is really very poor. If you look at 2 things which was put forward in terms of, I would like to just highlight this in terms of the 2 maps, and I'll show you the Northeast region. For the others who don't know this area, this is the Northeast region. Now, if you look at this region, this is a source, is the economic survey. In terms of entrepreneurial capabilities in agriculture and manufacturing, region shows really large potential. So there is this immense scope for actually pushing this area forward. If you look at the MSME landscape, that is the micro, small and medium enterprise landscape, we see a substantial amount of enterprises in this area. In the Northeast region, about 27 lakhs of enterprises are there, which employs about 55 lakh people. But they are extremely tiny. 99.8, almost 100% of them are in the category of micro. If you look at in terms of own account enterprises and establishment, this is the numbers. Own account enterprises are those enterprises which are very, very tiny, where there are no hired labor. So if you see here, large number of these enterprises are actually own account enterprises. In terms of employment, the establishment takes over a little, but by and large, own account enterprises dominate. Micro, informal, and mostly owned and worked by the same person. Those are the type of enterprises that are there in the Northeast region. But another interesting element which is there in Northeast region is this, that large number of enterprises are owned by women. Manipur, for instance, this is Manipur, almost 50 or almost half the enterprises are owned by women. Other parts of the hills, almost this large amount of them are owned by women, which is not the case in most parts of India. So this is something very, very important to take into consideration as we go forward. In terms of financial landscape, I already talked about very poor access. Just to give you a data, in terms of banks availability within 5 kilometers, 90% of the villages are 5 kilometers away from the bank. So obviously, enterprises finds it difficult to try because access to finance is limited. SAGs are there nearby, but as you know, SAGs are informal group. So that is one critical challenge again to push this region forward. So if I just summarize, large number of MSMEs is actually driving the enterprises, but the scale of operations are tiny, micro, informal. Large number of them are owned by women, and most of them are financially excluded. But in terms of growth, these are the different states, and this is India. If you see, compared to India, the growth rate between 5th and 6th centuries, you see the growth rate has been high. Of course, this has been low, the base has been low, but despite that, you see a vibrancy in these micro enterprises. This is in terms of some sort of glimpse on the micro enterprise landscape. Let's look at the skill landscape, because that is something very critical to push entrepreneurship forward. Now I take one marker, which is the ITIs. The ITIs are the basic level of skills which is provided in India. And I'm taking this as a marker. You take for Eastern India and Assam, in terms of availability of the ITIs, despite whatever they provide, let's look at what is the availability. Now, if you look at these, Assam falls on the last. The others are Bihar. I'm taking Eastern India, which is not so good in terms of growth of economic growth. In terms of these even eastern states, Assam comes way down. The other states like the Arunachal Pradesh or Mizoram or Meghalaya is still way down. So it is 0.96 ITIs per million population. In terms of seats, there are just 970 seats in ITIs in small portion pockets of Upper Assam, whereas there has been 14 or 1,447 secondary schools. So you have these many schools, and then you have this large number of people coming out, and there are very few ITIs which can actually take in some of these guys inside. So there is a large gap in the skill ecosystem. So the intake capacity and the capacity utilization in the IT escape is very, very low. Now I'd look at the other element which our ministry runs, what is the skill, the short-term courses. Now if you look at, and I'm taking this example for last 2 years for some sample institutions which are running in the Northeast, you will see large number of them are on the traditional skills, but they are not really promoting what I will call innovation within the traditional skills. And hence the skills are not really pushing on entrepreneurship at all. So what I'm calling them is, unless we don't design skills which is appropriate for the region, we will not be able to promote entrepreneurship, or will not be able to bring out skilled people which actually can promote entrepreneurship. So that is a major gap in the skill landscape too. So just a very synoptic sort of a view, and there are of course a large number of other challenges. But now, if these are the challenges, how do we go forward? What's the way forward for pushing growth in this area? I'm suggesting value chains around clusters. And as we know that large number of them are in the area of agri, horti, handloom, etc. And I'm also talking about integrating agriculture with MSME, which is the non-farm sector, and then building skills around it. I will talk about a little in detail as I go forward to that. The second one I'm calling about is building institutions around clusters, harnessing the social capital which is there. In fact, in most of the areas, you have social institutions which are very, very vibrant. So that is something that I would like to see needs to be harnessed for providing what I would call last mile connectivity, both in finance and also in terms of forward inputs. The third I'm talking about is, can we integrate the new thing which is happening in the entrepreneurship space, startups, people who are working mostly in solving solutions or providing solutions to problems in urban areas, can they be pushed towards actually solving problems in the rural areas? That is something that we're talking about. And lastly is, can we look at tourism and hospitality in this part of the country? I will go in each of these points a little in more detail. Let's take the first point, working with local value chains around clusters. Now, why am I talking about clusters? I already talked about a major problems of what we call as disaggregation. Now, if you need to work in areas like Northeast where densities are low, the only obvious way to go forward would be clusters. Clusters bring about a natural agglomeration of economies. They create economies of scale, and they are already thriving because of the fact that they are available. So that is something that we need to push, harness, and push forward. We already have, I call tea, horticulture, apiary, a whole lot of sectors that we can push through pushing clusters up. And not only that, we need to then integrate skills around these clusters. When I'm saying integrating skills, for instance, let me take an example of handloom. Now you are doing traditionally. Now, can we build up technology infusion? We already have some in terms of what we call larger productivity looms like jacquard, etc. Now, how do we integrate them? How do we skill manpower for these so that they will be able to run these jacquard looms in a more efficient manner and then push growth and productivity higher? So we need to build up skills around these clusters from the gaps that is available. That is one. Two, and there are other elements which is available. For instance, there is this one entrepreneur who's working with, he's just focusing on one element, which is dyeing. He's saying that we have local indigenous knowledge, and as you know that this is now local is something that everyone is looking forward to. He is working on local dyeing and creating value whereby he's being able to sell his stoles at prices of, internationally, at prices of about 20,000, 21,000. Which is based on just local indigenous knowledge. So he is building up these local indigenous base, providing some modernity to it, building up skills for people to take it up, and then pushing the value chain forward. That's something that we need to look at very closely. Can we use technology which can be adapted to region, appropriate technology? And then all of these, the advantage of clusters is that we can integrate women because it's in situ. And it is really very conducive for women to work. In fact, in a lot of these clusters, we see a large participation of women. So it also not just drives entrepreneurship, it also drives women entrepreneurship very, very strongly. So that is something that we are proposing in terms of one way forward. I would like to just give you a small, this one, because this is a practitioner's view. I have been actually working with clusters, so the view will be more of practitioner's view. I will share some of the experience we had in terms of building up clusters. Just one example in terms of clustering. Tea, as you know, Assam is famous for tea, and I think everyone knows Assam tea. But there is a new phenomena which is happening for the last 2 decades or so. We have something called, earlier tea gardens were large multinational corporations or large companies. This has been slowly taken over. In fact, now 50% of the production comes from small tea growers. These are local indigenous entrepreneurs who have set up these small tea growers, but they are only producing tea. So there is a very, very strong potential of pushing them forward by clustering them. We are doing that with about 4 clusters in the Northeast region. One of them is very, very successful, where we are setting up a processing plant. We also have green tea processing, whereby they are being able to sell their tea very, very across the value chain very quickly and in very, very high price. So that is something that we are looking at, which can be done. Spices is another area. These are some of the clusters that we are working across. I know all of you will not know it, in various sectors across the region. These are some of the sectors that we are working with in the different parts of the. These are initial years. Just 1 or 2 years that we have started working. So I will just share some of the initial findings in terms of what is happening in these clusters. These were, like I said, these are the bamboo cluster. These are the earlier products that was there. Thanks to design interventions, thanks to some technology, these are some of the products which have come out, and these are getting sold. These are the other products from that same cluster. These are airy silk, which is very, very indigenous to the region. It is also called non-violent silk. This is something that is, these are some of the products through the design intervention and technology intervention that we have taken up. This is water hyacinth, which is a local product. And then you see the product which is being transformed through this. These are some of the products that are there. This is something I would like to highlight because this is drapings of Aries silk, which is now going to California and France. These are all furnishings and drapings, and this is again built from the local clusters. These are some of the exhibitions which have gone there. So what I would like to say is that there is a whole lot of potential to push these forward. We had also during the COVID time taken up another scheme from the Prime Minister. It's called the Prime Minister Vandhan Yojana, basically working with forest communities, and with something called with some cash which was available through the minimum support price. These are some of the areas that we work. We could come up with honey which is getting sold. So immediately, even during COVID times, these are some of the products which could actually roll out. So there are a whole lot of potential which could be pushed to taking it forward. But what are the challenges in actually taking it forward? One, to make it sustainable. One, the marketing channel needs to be strengthened. That is something that needs to be done more closely, which I think needs to be pushed. Second, financial resources or financial linkages is something that needs to be strengthened further. And the third, which is very critical, is actually building up local institutions. That is something that we are looking at, which actually can provide both these marketing and financial access. So what we are saying is actually building up local institutions which can actually take it forward. It could be company, it could be cooperatives, but local institution which can actually be the crucible for the clusters to take it forward. They could do the connect, both in terms of financial linkages, market inputs, etc. We just started very initially. Like I said, in the Vandhan Kendras, initial progress looks to be good, but I think there are a lot of work needs to be further done in this. The other part that we are talking about is actually, can we integrate some of these guys who have excellent access to resources, knowledgeable, use all these technology platforms, etc., to actually solve problems in the rural areas. I would just give an example of one case called the Aronimaka tea. This gentleman is actually not selling tea. He is selling wellness. So he is using tea to actually come up with wellness product, thereby actually increasing the volume. And he works with these, like I said, small tea growers, these tiny entrepreneurs in the tea gardens. And he does tea which sells at normally at 400 rupees. He, through his various, I would say, mix, blend, etc., sells tea at about 5,000, 3,000 rupees per kilo, thereby increasing value. So I think these are something that it needs to be actually pushed through. That is another element that I think we need to work very closely, because that is something very exciting these guys are doing, and we need to bring these closer to the grassroots. This is some of the products that a person has. And the last I would like to say in tourism, we did some work. We have a business incubation center in adventure tourism. Now, adventure tourism, as you know, the area is Northeast region is known for water, hills, etc. So it's a natural base for adventure tourism. And I tell you, and this is an astounding success we had. Of the people that we train, 80% of them have actually set up enterprises in their area, which is sustainable, local. These guys don't need to be very educated. And as you know, our youth in the Northeast is sporty. There are outdoor types. So actually meets with their aspirations. So this is really taken off. So this is something that we need to really focus on, which is based on the resources of the area. To end up by, some of the photos of these guys, we have set up enterprises in the region. So this is some of the few practitioners' view of how we can use entrepreneurship as a vehicle to actually localize SDGs in the region. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the beautiful narration of the entrepreneurship and issues that are being faced by NER. As you rightly said, entrepreneurship as a vehicle can take us forward. With this, I would like to move on to our next panelist, Mr. Abhimanyu Manimaran. As experienced analyst, now dwelling into the depths of sustainability through his current role as a strategic advisor in United Nations Global Compact, Norway, where he is in charge of projects with sustainable finance and sustainable ocean business. He has also served as director in Greenman Industries, vendor management associate in Amazon, which has added to his rich experience in this area. Since his focus are and belief is on research on financial model innovation for biodiversity protection around us and the use of circular business models in everyday life, today he'll be enriching us on goal 14 and 15, which covers life on land and underwater and on the environmental economics. We are exploiting our Mother Earth for our economic growth. We all are waiting to know the ways around. Over to you, Mr. Abhimanyu.
Thank you so much, Sandhya. I would quickly like to thank all our esteemed guests who have joined us today. Thanks for the introduction, Dr. Father Daniel. It was really nice to see some familiar faces. I'm a former Josephite, and it's really nice to be a part of the community again. Thank you for an excellent presentation, Dr. Jacob. It was really insightful, and these conversations keep coming up every day in our work, and it was really nice to see that the information needed was sent out in the most easily understandable way. And thanks a lot, Dr. Abhijit Sharma, for telling us how important entrepreneurship is in our current landscape, and how important innovation is, and how it plays a pivotal role in our attempt to achieve the SDG goals by 2030. So I'm going to quickly share my screen and show my presentation. So I come to you all live. I'm fortunate enough to work from the UN office today. So I'm here live in Oslo. So it's afternoon, and when Purnima, the head of the organizing committee, reached out saying we need to talk about how we can envision the future we want, I always thought, coming from India and coming to Norway to understand the SDGs better, I thought it's a good start if we know where we are currently. So when we assume that we are well equipped with the things that we know, then it allows us to do better judgments on what we want to do. So the previous discussions were very informative in terms of the statistics provided, in terms of the directions we need to take. My discussion is sort of going to be more holistic in terms of the way we need to think to make ourselves relevant, because I do not believe sustainability is a particular department in an organization, but sustainability is well within our lives, and making sure that we approach every aspect of our lives sustainably is up to us, and that starts with educating ourselves. So the SDG goals in Norwegian, just for a change, but SDGs as a UN Global Compact focus. For those of you all who don't know, the Global Compact is responsible for bringing in businesses around the world to act on the sustainable development goals set up in 2000 or 1999 to be specific by Kofi Annan. It aims to bring organizations, research institutions, education institutions like St. Joseph's, and businesses to work on the sustainability effort. And we have two pillars here. One mainly saying responsible business is good, but the other pillar which we are going to do in the decade of action, like Sir Dr. Jacob referred to, is how we put these into action and how businesses can adopt these practices which can ensure sustainable development goals are achieved. So according to the World Investment Report by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, we need approximately 2.5 trillion to 3 trillion every year to achieve the SDG goals by 2030. In comparison, the global gross private sector financial assets is estimated at 200 trillion. So a key part of UN Global Compact would be to mobilize these financial assets towards SDGs. And one thing that in UN Global Compact Norway that we focus is, yes, do not look at sustainability as something that you have to do because you have to report on something, but look at sustainability as a business opportunity, because the immense opportunity of companies going into a sustainable route is very evident in terms of the business models that are slowly coming up. Yes, so we envision economic growth and we envision economics when put into a graph as a spiral or as a line that keeps going up and up and up. But let's look at economics, or let's look at the way we look at economics in a much more holistic way. And Kate Raworth, a very popular economist, presented back in 2012 the donut model, or what we call as the donut economics. And this was revolutionary. And this showed us that we have to consider externalities like social as well as environmental issues in our scope of human well-being, and not just focus completely on GDP. So when we are talking about the donut, we are seeing two outfalls. The donut is in the center, and the space that has the donut is the safe and just space for your humanity. Whereas within the donut is our social foundation, key elements that we need to ensure there are no critical human deprivations. And the outside of the donut is where our natural environmental thresholds come into play. So let's look at this. So there are 11 social foundations that we need to achieve, and a lot of it is related to the SDG model. So when someone is looking at an SDG from an outside perspective, it is easy to get overwhelmed for a minute, looking at so many numbers. Which SDG is important? Just because one is no poverty, is that the most important? Or just because climate change is 13, is that the most, is that not so relevant? But this model sort of helps us understand that there is a huge connection between the social elements as well as the environmental elements. And each are interlinked in a way that we have to make sure that we achieve these holistically and look at this holistically. So the environmental ceilings has 9 environmental components that we have to make sure that we do not overuse. And this is the environmental ceiling bit of it. And the social foundation shows food, water, income, education, resilience, political voice, jobs, energy. And Dr. Jacobs previously showed a graph that said what is our current status on all of this. But this sort of shows a more holistic approach in terms of how we vision these goals and how it is important for humanity to remain in the safe space so that we continue the Holocene effect that has held Earth together for the last 10,000 years. Yes, a little bit into the social foundation. We do know there are some shortcomings in this. For example, food. More than 1 billion people around the world still face hunger. But do you know that it is easy for them to stop being in the situation only if 1% of the global food supply had better value chains? Then energy. Almost 20% of the world population lacks electricity. But with less than 1% increase in global CO2 emissions, this can be managed. 21% of the world's global population have less than $1.25. It was something that we saw in Dr. Arun's presentation as well. But they would require just 0.2% of the global income currently. And inequality, which is another goal, we saw the progress on inequality, which was not very good. Then there is the environmental ceiling. Carbon emissions. 50% of global carbon emissions are generated by just 11% of the people. So there is a huge disparity in terms of who is producing these carbon emissions, and we need a more targeted approach. Land use, synthetic fertilizers to lead to toxic runoff that impact aquatic life. Currently, I'm in the middle of a research that shows the interconnection between biodiversity as well as financial risks. So if we are to protect our biodiversity systems, and how can we place a price on these biodiversity systems so that, one, we ensure that they are not exploited, but also we ensure that they are brought into the mainstream finances so that when there is a price for all these biodiversity topics or issues, like when we are talking about deforestation or seagrass meadows or corals, when they have a value and show their value within the financial model, it is easier for us to manage these environmental issues and also make sure that we are within the environmental ceiling. So the current state of the donut. So this has come out from last year, and it shows that we are overreaching 4 of our external ecological ceilings: climate change, biodiversity, land conversion, and the other one. And in the remaining 11 social foundation ones, we have not achieved a lot. We are on a shortfall. Basically, the foundations are not strong. So just to give you all some metrics, gender inequality, which is very close to me, and thanks to my friends, I've been constantly educated on how important it is. There is a 34% employment gap between men and women. 77% of people in national parliaments are men when compared to women. So there is a huge gender inequality gap, and these are things that we need to consciously think about in our everyday life. And if that meant me losing a place on this panel for someone else to be represented and be represented by a woman, that would be necessary. And these are conscious small things that we have to take forward. Then look at the environmental stress can exacerbate poverty. So we are talking about how environmental issues are related to human well-being. So with global, let's take for example the biggest of all, the climate change. With global temperature rises, increase in floods, shifts in forests and agricultural systems, it is going to have an adverse effect on poverty, equality, and other social aspects. Similar with biodiversity. Biodiversity is known for its resilient systems. Amazon's rainforest act as the biggest carbon sinks, as well as the coral reefs or the marine biodiversity act take up to 50% of carbon sequestration in this world. But with increasing temperatures, there is a loss of this biodiversity, and that could mean it has an adverse effect on social systems. Air pollution, for example, which is a big issue in India. Human health is directly related, and it is proved that human health is directly related to air pollution, changing global rainfall patterns and monsoon systems. So these systems sort of become uneven when climate change is an issue. So when I approach sustainability, yes, everyone says sustainability is not just about environmental change or climate change, but I do think there is a bigger connection that we are failing to make, and we are not considering environmental change in our main strategies, our focuses. So this is really important from the UNGC's point of view. So key next steps. This is an interesting concept that Dr. Arun Jacob mentioned. It's called systems thinking. And since we have a lot of students here today joining us from SJCC, the way we think about our systems or the way we think about the things around us has to evolve. Systems design or systems thinking needs to be more mainstream. For example, Bangalore, known for its startup culture, is excellent in terms of understanding product design and service design and coming up with amazing innovations that are replicated even in Silicon Valley. But when we go beyond these spheres of product and service design and expand our avenues to systems design or systems thinking, then we sort of correlate different issues in the society and connect them and bring about a process change and understand what is the actual necessary system innovations that we need. Another big thing that we are really passionate about, at least in UNGC Norway, is the circularity approach to everything. Currently, we are in a degenerative linear economy. So when we say the world is 8.6% circular or 8.6% circularity gap, it means that 91.4% of the resources that we take from the earth end up as not being used again. And there is immense potential for businesses to reevaluate their models and increase their profits in return by using this circularity approach. We go from a degenerative design to a very regenerative design. And that is really important because we are going from a take, make, use, lose situation to actually using and reusing and recycling. And it's not just about how we put our plastics in and recycle them again. It is a much bigger design that we have to look as businesses. And there is an immense opportunity when businesses remodel their businesses to ensure there is a lot more circularity, saving on material costs that not only help their businesses, but also the society. Thank you. This brings end to my presentation. Let's think more donut. Let's think or envision to be in a donut going forward. Thank you.
Certainly, Mr. Abhimanyu. Thank you for giving us new way of looking at economic growth from line graph to the donut graph. And of course, thank you for encouraging our student community towards systems thinking, which is the need of the hour and dire necessity of the future for sure. Use, reuse, and recycle would surely be our mantra for the coming days. And with this, I would like to move on to our next panelist, Mr. Sankalp Sharma. He is the founder and director of the Such Foundation. Though through this and along with thousands of young leaders, he has donated tons of essentials to the needy and also planted over 5,000 saplings and created Miyake Forest. He is one of India's youngest climate reality leaders to be trained by the 45th President of USA. Also, he has gone around the world interacting with USA President Barack Obama, Prime Minister of Nepal, Mr. Baburam Bhattarai, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, and several other world leaders, influencers, and celebrities on the sustainable future of India and the power of the youth to make it a reality. He has backed the International Young Leader Award, Akhil Uday Award, Global Young Voices, and many more. As we all know, youth power is the strongest tool to achieve any determined goal. Here we have with us Mr. Sankalp Sharma to brief us on the role of youth in achieving the SDG, the reality behind SDG and how they actually work. I welcome you to the discussion. And sir, tell us, are we truly working in the right direction?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, panelists, all the esteemed staff, the organizing team, and students around the world. Thank you so much for the lovely introduction. As Sandhya ma'am said, my name is Sankalp. I am presently in the United States, so it's about 8 a.m. here for me, and I've been with you all since 6 a.m. And this has been definitely so fantastic and so educational for me. I will say that it's an absolute honor for me to speak after these three brilliant speakers, and at the same time a little nerve-wracking because they come from the best backgrounds with the most important and factual data. So what I'm going to do is talk more about experiences, talk more about the youth, and focus less on the factual data. But as I start, I want to, of course, focus a little bit on the MDGs, on the SDGs, and then move on to the youth and my journey. So as 2015 comes to a close and the world takes a look at the progress that has been made, it is clear that while much has been accomplished with more than 1 billion people having been lifted out of poverty, for example, many of the MDGs were still not successful. They were not a success, and some even failed outright. And one of the major MDG failures that we faced was the fact that the success of the goals was not experienced equally across the globe. The MDGs were drawn up by a group of experts solely from the UN, whereas the new Sustainable Development Goals have evolved after a long and extensive consultative process, including 70 open working groups, civil society organizations, thematic consultations, country consultations, and participation of general public through face-to-face meetings and online mechanisms, including some going to do door-to-door services. While MDGs were focused with only 8 goals, 21 targets, and 63 indicators, the SDGs are way more broad, more wholesome, as Dr. Jacob mentioned, with 17 goals and 169 targets. Now, one of the most important thing about the SDGs that we often fail to recognize is the fact that every single SDG is interconnected. They are deeply interconnected. And this has two positive outcomes. A lack of progress on one goal hinders progress on several others. And in a world of increasing inequality, civil unrest, and environmental stress, businesses will only thrive if the 2030 agenda is realized. The second is that, for example, if you were to work on the field of climate change and you work in the field of advocacy, you are talking to people about it, you're educating people. Not only are you working on goal 13, you're working on quality education. If you partner with another organization, you're working on goal 17. So many a times in lots of campaigns, in lots of projects, many of these goals can often be interlinked and worked on together. Now, to put this in perspective with the youth, for too long, we have been forced to believe in conventional ideas. For too long, the human race has been surrounded with stereotypes, cliches, and standardized habits. For too long, the rights and the wrong, the good and the bad have been set by individuals that precede us. Am I right? Well, if you actually think about it, this is not the case. I want you all to take a moment and go back to a moment of your childhood or a moment of your youth when you went to your parents and asked them a silly question. It could be anything. Why is India called India? Who invented the tire? Why is blue blue? What is sustainability? Questions that often made our parents either laugh at us or probably get a tad bit too curious for being so inquisitive and asking something that was so evident and normal. But now as we look back, how many of these answers do we actually know? Why is India called India? Who actually invented tires? And why is blue blue? As we grow older, we start accepting facts instead of understanding them, which is what we truly wanted to do as young people. Now, this gives the youth an amazing, amazing power, which is the power of having a free mind. The youth are free from the realms of society, the realms of not just accepting facts, but really understanding them. And because of this, they have some of the most innovative approaches to global problems. And this has been noticed worldwide. And I want to focus on some examples in India. Let's talk about Ankit Quatra. Ankit Quatra is a young Indian boy who was at a family wedding when he saw tons of food going to waste. What did he do? He decided that he's going to take all the food that is wasted at weddings, events, functions, conferences, in buffets, and get it all donated, get it all shared with people that cannot afford a meal. Let's take the example of Trisha Shetty. Trisha Shetty is a brilliant female advocate and the founder of She Says, and she's done some brilliant work with women advocacy, with helping rape victims and helping victims of molestation with end-to-end help, helping them file FIRs, lawyers support, support in the field of medicine, and so much more. So when we look at youth, we often have 2 or 3 opportunities in front of us that weren't presented to me, but I went out, found, and learned for myself. Now, to give you a little bit more context, in 2016, I was invited to become one of India's youngest climate reality leaders to be trained by former Vice President Al Gore of the United States. And over here, I learned something extremely, extremely important, which was not taught directly as a part of the conference, but was an inference of my experience. I learned from brilliant speakers. Let's say, for example, the father of environmental justice, Dr. Robert Bullard. And another example could be Dr. Susan Pacheco, who's won the People of America Award, who is a doctor that is working on creating cures, finding cures for diseases that are caused by the environment. Or Dr. Robert Bullard, who fights in court with organizations like coal mining companies that deny effect to climate change. One of the most important things that I learned here, which I think is really important for the youth that is watching this discussion today, is that there can always be a passion that you have, and there can be a career choice that you have, and you can always bring them together. And with these 2 examples of Dr. Robert Bullard and Susan Pacheco, you see their passion for climate change and their career choice of law or medicine, and bringing that together to work in a field. So often you need to find your own career choice if you can't find one, if there is not one directly available. But many a times, especially through this conference, I found out that you can and you should try and find ways to take your career choice and your passion and bring them together. And that will help you be the most successful in any kind of thing that you do. Now, the second thing, as I started working post my training with Vice President Gore, I was, I started presenting speeches. I did tons of things. I worked with organizations like Walk for Water. I worked with the UN for a little bit. I briefly worked with the Obama Foundation and did tons of work with lots of organizations and loved what I was doing. But one of the things that kind of, I would say, hindered my progress was the fact that I had tons of ideas myself, being the young change maker with, a free mind. But I was not able to implement these ideas with the organizations that I was working. Not to say that I was not having fun. I loved what I was doing. I loved implementing projects and doing all of that, but I was unable to implement the ideas that I had. And therefore, about 5 to 6 years ago, I came up with my own brainchild called the Such Foundation, which I launched in 2018 and is about 2 years old now. So what the Such Foundation essentially does is 2 or 3 things, and what sets us apart is one fundamental aspect. Our organization solely works with the youth around the world. So you could be a young person anywhere and you always have a place at the Such Foundation. In the past 2 years, we're in over 10 countries, 11 now over the course of the pandemic. We have thousands of young leaders working with us. And how the organization essentially functions is, let's say you are an environmental advocate, a young change maker in the field of Goal 13. And I am from India, working on quality education, for example. What we will do is that if you work by yourselves, you would create a campaign, create a project and work within your country or within your city or within your state. As soon as you join the Such Foundation, you're a part of a group of some of the best, most innovative change makers worldwide. And what we do is we will provide one whole month to each change maker. So what we do, let's say we provide this month as the climate change month with Goal 13. So the African young leader from Nigeria leads this entire month. We come up with some amazing, easy projects to implement that have a lasting impact. And he will go ahead and teach this project or how it is to be implemented to all the young people worldwide. So let's say his project was to plant saplings. If he were to do it himself, he would plant 1,000 or 2,000 saplings in Nigeria. But through the Such Foundation, through the course of a month and teaching people how to acquire funds, how to, bring people on board to help you plant, how to acquire plants, what is the right method of planting. When he plants 2,000 saplings in Nigeria, our team in Nepal plants 1,000 saplings, India plants 5,000 saplings, and the change that is done simply starts multiplying many-fold. And then the next month is my month. And so I will be doing a project on quality education, probably, finding ways on how education can be improved. And then that is implemented worldwide. So it is a very, very simple structure, but focuses on 2 things. One, working solely with the youth, and 2, always and always focusing on all of these goals and learning from people that have extensive research and extensive skills in any certain goal. Now, this leads me to my most important point. There are 2 choices ahead of us. One is, as one of our speakers said, the field of entrepreneurship that I took up. Now, it is very, very important to educate yourself first before you start any kind of action. And many a times people tend to join bandwagons, especially the youth is what I have noticed. They say that, for example, plastic is bad, so you assume sometimes plastic is bad. You need to continue to question these facts and understand why is plastic bad? What is an alternate that they are providing and why is it better than plastic? And many a times people consider paper straws better than plastic straws. They may be, but they still cause huge effects to the environment. And so trying and finding out an actual alternate that helps out with several of these issues is so important. So one of the most important things, like I said, is trying to venture into entrepreneurship. If you have a clear idea, a clear knowledge base, and a clear set of understanding, set of rules that you want to implement. A second and more important for me is going the route of partnerships. Why I consider this really important is, let's say you're really, really passionate about gender equality, right? Now you don't have to be a champion of gender equality. We don't expect you to know everything about gender equality. But what we do expect is that you find someone who's working in the field of gender equality, has tons and tons of experience, and join their mission. And that's what we do at the Such Foundation. We not only are entrepreneurs connecting young people around the world, but we focus on really bringing on board people that have extensive knowledge and learning from them. So partnerships become extremely, extremely important. And now finally, as I conclude, I want to really share a personal anecdote, which, was something that really changed my life and will put all of what I've said into perspective. So I am around 13 years old in middle school, and my father gives me the essential role of getting rid of all the old newspapers at home and selling them to the kabadi wala, and whatever money I get in return, I could, keep that money. So this was a golden opportunity for me to have my favorite ice cream every month. Now, how many of us know who a kabadi wala is? So I know most of the Indian people would know, but for the people outside of India, a kabadi wala is someone from lower financial background. He comes to your house bi-weekly or monthly, collects all your old newspapers, takes them by weight, and pays you a certain cost for it. So every month on a Sunday, the kabadi wala would come home, I would give him all the old newspapers and bargain with him for every single extra rupee. He said 8 rupees a kilo, I would bargain for 9, just so I could get more money and probably some month enjoy 2 of my favorite ice creams. Now, month by month, he would come, I would give him my newspapers, and I always loved my favorite butterscotch ice cream that I had after school. So this one day, as I'm enjoying my ice cream on a hot summer afternoon, I saw the kabadi wala. The kabadi wala was always seen with 3 things: a cycle to commute, 2 rag bags on either side of his cycle in which he collected all the old newspapers, old magazines that were given to him, and a rusty old weighing machine with which he weighed the newspapers and paid you a certain cost for. Now that day, as I saw the kabadi wala, he was pedaling his cycle this peak summer afternoon with 2 full rag bags on either side of his cycle, one of his sons in the front and one son at the back, cycling uphill. And with every drop of his sweat, my ice cream didn't taste the same anymore. At this point, being a young person, I started questioning an underlying fact that everyone in the world, especially in India, accepts is you take money from a kabadi wala and you give him your old newspaper. I questioned this fact simply because it did not seem right for me, someone who comes from a financially secure background, to take money from someone who's not sure if his family will eat the next meal or probably even have shelter the next day. So that day I go back home to my father and I tell him, Pa, I saw this and I have decided that I want to give away all of my old newspapers completely free of cost. And my father, kind of shocked, said, Beta, if that's what you would like to do, that's what you should. And so the kabadi wala would come every month. I would give him all my old newspapers, not take a single penny for it without any ulterior motives. Now, the thing is that the kabadi wala spoke the local language of Kannada and I only spoke English or Hindi. So we never really communicated through words, but solely through actions. So he was coming month by month. I gave him all my old newspapers. And a few months later, I realized apart from newspapers, I have magazines, school books from my previous year that I wasn't using. I started giving all of those to him as well. 2 months in, 3 months in, 4 months into the practice, I see that I have new things, old things that I don't use. Could be toys, bed sheets, clothes, books, an old phone, a charger or whatever. I started giving him everything that I had that I wasn't using, irrespective of old or new. So he would come 6 months in, 7 months in, 8 months in, take all of these products, and I would never take any money for it. Now, I lived in an apartment complex at the time in Bangalore, and so some of my friends found out about what I was doing. And they started this practice as well. They said, you know, it makes sense. Someone doesn't have money, let's do this for free. They started giving out all of their things completely free, of course. 9 months in, 10 months in, and it's been a year now. So after a year, on one Sunday afternoon, my doorbell rings, I run to the door. I see the kabadi wala there and I run back in. I did not have any newspapers on that particular day. So I come out and I tell him no newspapers today. and he says, no, no, and tries to convey something to me. But I cannot understand due to the lack of words and not being able to understand his language. All of a sudden, this man completely falls down on my doorstep and starts sobbing. And I am extremely confused. Why is someone coming to my doorstep Sunday morning and crying? So I, natural reaction, I sit there with him, I pat his back and I try to understand the gravity of the situation, but I'm completely confused with no idea of what to do. Eventually, as the man collected himself, he went towards his rag bag in which he had been taking all the old newspapers and all the things that I was giving him, reached out inside it and took out 2 cards. And I distinctly remember one was blue and the other light pink. And he gave them to me. As I looked at those cards, the tears moved from his eyes to mine. They were the report cards of both his children. And with the practice that I had adopted, he was able to save enough money to pay for the education of both his children. And this was simply because I was a young person who challenged a quintessential norm or something that was extremely common in India. I challenged it, I questioned these underlying facts, and I came up with my own innovative solution. Help is possible to be given in any way possible, but as long as you challenge everything around you, you need to be innovative, you need to stop accepting facts, and you need to have a free mind. So I believe the youth of St. Joseph's has some brilliant potential. In the past, I've had tons of my interns through the internship programs that we host from St. Joseph's. I've worked with some of the most brilliant minds of St. Joseph's. I've done tons of events with you all. And I strongly believe that St. Joseph's has some of the most brilliant youth potential and can go a really, really long way in the field of sustainability. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
You definitely moved the tears from your eyes to all of our eyes. And yeah, conventional ideas, bye-bye. And passion and career choice can be brought together to make our life a totally different one. So with this, I thank all of our esteemed panelists for the lively and relevant discussions. It indeed shed light on the multiple viewpoints on the common objective of achieving the SDGs. As expected, we have a volume of questions that have poured in. Let me pick your thoughts on the same. We are moving on to the Q&A session. We have our 3 panelists and Dr. Arun with us. The very first question, what are the measures that can be adopted to improve the air quality index while maintaining the focus on development and employment opportunities? I request Dr. Arun Jacob to answer this.
Thank you. I'll keep it very brief. I know we have a lot of questions to get through because the question on air quality improvement, it differs from country to country, context to context. So I think this is something we referred to earlier in terms of the systems analysis, right? So we really need to understand, for example, if the context we're talking is about Delhi, then what are the causes of the seasonal air quality problems in Delhi, and then try to understand and try to see what are the stakeholders linked to this issue, what are the causes, and what if we take a policy action, who will be affected. So we need to do that systems analysis. So it's not a very straightforward answer that there is no silver bullet to just say we do this, the air quality would improve. But of course, some fundamental things have to go in terms of our dependence on fossil fuels, on polluting factories, and as well as, for example, burning of field residuals. There could be better ways to use these. For example, just a case of burning of crop residues in around Delhi. I had a talk with an entrepreneur in Malaysia who used to take these leftover products and crop residues and then develop a lot of products out of it, creating a value system around it, create a business around it. So this entrepreneurship and the social impact innovations are definitely the key to answer and solve some of these air quality issues without having that detrimental issue, effects on societies and the vulnerable population, who survive on many of these livelihoods. I stop here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And Mr. Sankal, what do you think is the role that NGOs can play towards SDGs? Sir, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's a great question. And personally, I believe NGOs play a very key role in working towards the SDGs. And I have noticed this in the US, especially, in the US, the focus of NGOs is slightly different. They work towards advocating against organizations that aren't doing well in terms of any of the sustainable development goals. And this has been visible in the boycotts that happened with McDonald's in the past, with not providing equal cost opportunities to the coffee manufacturers in with Starbucks. And so NGOs play a very important role on holding companies accountable for the work they're doing, making sure they're sustainable, and creating lots of I would say campaigns against them if they were to go out and not agree with the changes that need to necessarily be done. So NGOs play a key role in doing a lot of social work as well. We have lots of people called conscious investors who do not always invest for profit, but focus on two things: profit and being conscious about where they're investing their money. So lots of NGOs can receive brilliant funding from there. And one of the key things NGOs does is keep companies accountable for the work they're doing and really keep them in check for their sustainable standards. So that's where I think NGOs play a key role. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And now this question is to Mr. Abhimanyu. The logistic industry all over the world is still heavily dependent on non-sustainable source of energy and leaving heavy carbon footprint. Are you aware of any possible disruptions to be expected in this industry?
Yes, certainly. Thank you for the question, Jeremiah Kumar. The idea is IMO recently signed a call to action that said over the next, by 2050, 50% of all emissions are going to be reduced on the shipping industry. So there are huge technology potentials that are coming into picture. The use of hydrogen as a possible fuel on board, and most importantly, identifying ways to electrify ships that could sort of reduce your carbon footprint because of that. Yeah, these are some of the technology disruptions. The shipping industry has been around forever, and they are on top of what the needs are supposed to be in terms of emission cut downs. And they have set an ambitious goal for 2050, and it is going to be interesting to witness how these technologies are going to be made mainstream, scaled up, and how they're going to be inculcated.
Thank you. All these while, we have believed that Manipur women are too good for their beauty. And today we realize that they are not just beautiful, they're also very courageous to handle industries on their own. I think someone who got inspired by this has posed this question. Women they face glass ceiling in every sector and in every corner of the world. Policies introduced are not implemented in many organizations. What are some solutions to tackle the same and ensure equal opportunities? I request Sir Abhijit to answer this. Sir, you're on mute.
Right. You're talking about women entrepreneurship. I feel the way forward is for women to actually get into entrepreneurship. That is the way forward. I think in many places across the region, and even in backward regions, what we find is actually women taking up entrepreneurship, and not only increasing their economic cash in the households, but also reimagining or renegotiating their relationships with the entire social systems. I can give a lot of instances where women actually have renegotiated places in the society through this. And one of the important elements of women entrepreneurship is also that normally they also are, they take up businesses which are caring, which are lighter, in a sense that they actually are more conducive towards the SDG goals. So most of these women entrepreneurs or activities that they take up. So I would like to suggest that I think entrepreneurship is something that is waiting to happen. And I think the government of India also is very keen to promote that. So that's something I think we need to see and push forward. In terms of the in a job itself, I think also if you see in formal sectors, I think increasingly we see this changes is not much, but I would like to suggest that entrepreneurship is the way forward, a very exciting way forward, and particularly for a country like India, where actually since we are at a lower level, I think things are an opportunity for us. Even post-COVID or during the COVID, I showed you some of the pictures. It was the women which are actually driving the economy because they work with sectors which are not so much affected by COVID. That is like farm, agri, etc. So I think that is something that we need to look at. Thank you.
Thank you very much for encouraging all our women sector once again, sir. And here is a question to Dr. Arun, sir. Eradication of poverty is an illusion or a practical approach?
Thank you for that question. Of course, that's the first goal which of the SDGs is to eradicate poverty, and it is an ambitious goal. Let's be honest, because just because of the COVID-19 impact, we assume that even 10 years of progress that we have made in poverty reduction can be wiped out just because of a shock of COVID-19. So it is a very ambitious goal to achieve by 2030, but it's possible because just we are from the region of Asia and the Pacific where we've seen the biggest reduction in poverty history at a poverty level in record time in both thanks to China and India since 1990. So it is definitely possible through effort. So we continue to believe that at the UN, and we try to continue to advocate for the same. So let's be optimistic, but it is not going to be an easy task. But it is definitely possible by ensuring sustainable and inclusive economic pathways, as was discussed by our eminent panelists today. Even in the case of Northeast India, if you're able to transform from a a low value kind of a lifestyle associated with production of basic commodities to higher value added products and entrepreneurship by connecting different ecosystems, innovation ecosystem, along with our primary production capacity, there are unlimited pathways to get people out of poverty, and I firmly believe in it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, the eradication of poverty is practically possible, provided all of us work towards it. And here is a question to Mr. Abhimanyu. Cyclical pattern of natural disasters. Where exactly is this leading us to?
Okay, yeah, the uncertainty of natural disasters is a result of the climate change effects, and there's two poles to how we approach this. One is building better resilience infrastructure and planning for better resilience infrastructure. So what I mean by resilience infrastructure is identifying the possible risks associated with climate change as well as these natural disasters, and ensuring a well-prepared system or a well-prepared approach to this. For example, COVID was a perfect example as to how we could approach a natural disaster situation, because it sort of stops all our value chains and it stops all our means of living. And this is a perfect example of how we can adopt and encourage innovation and try to come up with new systems that will make us more resilient in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And moving towards Mr. Sankalp, what are the ways, according to you, through which youth can contribute towards a sustainable future? A youth icon should answer this.
Well, I mean, that's a great question. And I think one of the coolest things that you could do is join my foundation. We always love to have as many people as we can. We love young people. That's who we work with. That's our main organization structure is working with the youth. So one of the coolest things you could do, I would say, is work with me. I would be honored. We'd love that. But apart from that, certain steps that you can take is try and volunteer in your community. It's really, really important to work on volunteering. And secondly, I know the importance of internships that colleges have to work with corporate organizations, MNCs like Goldman Sachs and Ernst and Young. I think also trying to focus more on working with young entrepreneurial startups, young sustainable startups that are in the profit-making business through their sustainable practices is a great way to build on. And if you start early at a younger age, by the time they're successful, within 5 or 6 years, you could be way ahead of your friends or colleagues. So work with sustainable startups, work on a volunteer basis with as many organizations as you can, be more involved in your community, and join the Such Foundation.
I am definitely joining, and I hope all our youth watching this series are definitely going to join this. And due to paucity of time, we could take up only a few questions. And here I move on to our last question to Dr. Abhijit. Sir, MSMEs in India are hesitant to pursue the SDGs as they think it is an contrast with profitability. How can that perception be changed? Sir, you're on mute.
This is very, very far from truth, because the government of India is really very keen. The MSME ministry is actually very keen to drive this cluster. I'll just give you small examples of it. One, I think you are aware that there has been a redefinition of the MSME sector itself. Structurally, there has been a change. So it is we have a composite criteria now, investment and turnover. We are allowing actually the ease of business, regulations are coming down. That is in terms of the structural. There is also what we call as, if people are aware of the finance, the RBI repo rate has been cut down to 4%, to 40 basis point down for the MSME sector. In terms of equity, there is a huge fund being created. We're calling it Fund of Funds, with a corpus of 10,000 crores. To be given to the MSME sector. Then we have also that e-global tenders of 200 crores above has been disallowed. You have now e-market linkage, which is being very strongly promoted for the MSME sector. We have, in terms of liquidity, we are collateral now. The collateral free extension of 3 lakh crores has been for existing loan. It has been extended. Debt has been restructured, as you're aware of it. In terms of early receivables of MSME, I'm in the government institute. Even institute like ours have got this strong advisory that any of these MSME, if any of the dealings with MSME, we need to immediately pay, otherwise we'll be taken to the task. So there is very strong emphasis on ensuring that the MSME. So today, actually, despite the pandemic, the government is very keen. So there is actually a whole support system for MSME. And whoever's asked the question, I think it's the right time actually to plunge and get into it. I'm sure there will be the banking subsystem, the government system, the entire support mechanisms actually there to help you. Thank you. There is, sorry, Sandhya, there is one question I saw which is not there, and I wanted to take it. This is something to do with insurgency. That is a common thing for the Northeast, an important tag which is always put. So there was this question saying that how do you look at insurgency and this effect in economy? I would like to just say that Northeast is changing, just like the country is changing. And when I showed all these pictures, this is what it is happening. The insurgencies have been there primarily because of low economic growth. Actually, these are things which are changing the region. So insurgencies now is a very, very low ebb. The markers now for Northeast should be others, local, Atmanirbhar, self-reliant products, tourist places. So that's how I think Northeast should be seen now, not as places where insurgents are there taking guns and making difficult life for many, many people. So thank you. I'd like to take that. I wanted to answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. With this, we wind up the Q&A session. We at SJCC and UNGC, and I hope that today's discussions were enriching and worth all of our time. We look forward to each of us playing a part in achieving the SDGs. Now, I hand over the session to Ms. Asha.
Gratitude is the fairest blossom which springs from the soul. On behalf of the organizing committee and the institution, I sincerely thank the dignitaries, Dr. Arun Jacob for the educative keynote address, the panel members, Dr. Abhijit Sharma, Mr. Abhimanyu Manimaran, and Mr. Sankalp Mohan Sharma, for sharing their knowledge and experience in the realm of sustainable development goals. Special thanks to the moderator, Ms. Sandhya P. Nagar, for skillfully handling the panel discussion and Q&A. We would like to specially appreciate the support extended by the UNGCNI, our co-collaborator towards this initiative. We also thank our associate collaborators, Masa University, Malaysia, the Such India Foundation, and Women in Tech Maldives. It's time to express our heartfelt gratitude to our dear father principal, Reverend Dr. Daniel Fernandez, SJ, for keeping his faith on us and giving us this opportunity to organize the international webinar series. Thank you, Father, for rendering your constant support throughout. We would now like to specially thank our registrar, Dr. Nirmala Joseph, for relentlessly guiding us and for all the timely interventions without which the webinar would not have become a reality. We also express our earnest gratitude to the Vice Principals, Ms. Neha Rai and Dr. Raja Jabasing. Their constructive feedbacks have been instrumental at various stages of the preparation. A big thank you to the HODs for accommodating all our requests. On behalf of the institution, I would now like to thank and congratulate the webinar convener, Dr. Purnima Vijaykumar, for her meticulous coordination. As we come to the end of the event, I would like to acknowledge and appreciate the organizing committee members for contributing their best and working towards the completion of the first episode. We indeed have a long way to go. Thank you very much for all the patience and support. We thank all the student committee members for being commendably cooperative and for providing the creative inputs. Participants, kindly note your e-certificates will be sent to your registered email address latest by Tuesday, 1st of September. Please do provide your feedback to us on the link in the chat room. We'll be happy to hear from you. Looking forward to see you all in the second episode. Thank you.